Hi guys! Welcome to another session of your online reading hub. I am Jamal Manalo, but you can call me Ate Jam, and I will be your storyteller for today. So, before we begin, let me just introduce myself. I am currently a college student at Far Eastern University, Manila, and I am taking up Bachelor of Arts in Communication. So, bago tayo pumunta sa kwento natin ngayong araw na to na pinamagatang Big Sister by Consorcio Borge, let me just ask you this question. Are there any changes in your life ever since you stepped in high school? Like, may mga napansin ba kayong pagbabago sa sarili nyo ever since nag-grade 7 kayo? Ayan. So, kunwari, isipin nyo, gustong-gusto nyong ginagawa to nung elementary, but ever since you stepped in high school, parang hindi nyo na siya masyadong nagagawa. Parang naiwan nyo na siya sa inyong pagkabata. Ayan. So, I will just give you a few seconds to think about it. And your few seconds starts now. So, use that thoughts in your mind and remember those thoughts dahil magagamit natin yan as we reflect on the story of Itong. So, let me start our story. You can use this, said Inshang, smiling brightly and trying to keep her tears back. It is still quite strong and you will not outgrow it for a year yet. Itong watched his sister fold his old khaki shirt carefully and pack it into the rattan tampipi, which already bulged with his clothes. He stood helplessly by, shifting his weight from one bare foot to the other, looking down at his big sister who had always done everything for him. There, that's done, said Inshang, pressing down the lid. Give me that rope. I'll truss it up for you. And be careful with it, Itong. Your Tia Rin has been very kind to lend it to us for your trip to Vigan. Itong assented and obediently handed his sister the rope. His eyes followed her deft movements with a visible impatience. His friends were waiting outside to play with him. He was 12 years old and growing up so fast. So that is the first part of our story kung saan nakilala natin ang dalawang main character. So unahin na natin si Inshang. Si Inshang, siya yung big sister sa kwento na to, and she was described as someone na ginagawa ang lahat para sa mas nakakabata niyang kapatid na si Itong. So si Itong naman, isa siyang 12-year-old na batang lalaki, and sinabi dun sa kwento na he seems to be growing up too fast. Ayan. So, ang kwento natin, nagsimula siya sa isang maliit na kwarto kung saan iniimpake ni Inshang ang mga gamit ni Itong. So, tignan natin mamaya kung saan ba talaga pupunta si Itong. Dahil ang nabanggit lang doon is pupunta siya ng Vigan. But ano kaya ang gagawin niya doon? So, let's proceed to our story. Sometimes, when Inshang is toiling in the kitchen, sweeping the house, or washing the clothes by the well in front of the yard, she held a long session with herself. She admitted that she did not want Itong to grow. She wanted to keep him the boy that he was always. Inshang had raised Itong from the whimpering little red lump of flesh that he was when their mother died soon after giving birth to him. She had been as a mother to him as long as she could remember. May I go out now and play manang? And Inshang heard herself saying, It will be a year before you will see your friends again. So go now. She listened to the sound of his footsteps down the bamboo ladder, across the bare earthen front yard. Then she heard him whistle. There were answering whistles, running feet. On that second part of the story, nakita natin na merong special bond between Itong and Inshang. Parang more than ordinary na magkapatid. Naging nanay na din si Inshang kay Itong because, ayun nga, maaga silang naulila sa kanilang ina dahil after Itong was born, ay namatay na ito. Ayan. So, sinabi sa story na yon na si Inshang gusto niya lang palaging maliit yung kapatid niya, na si Itong gusto niya palaging nasa tabi niya lang, nababantayan niya. Kasi nga, she already dedicated her life raising her brother. So, parang naging selfless na si Inshang pagdating sa kapatid niya. So, sinabi nga na more than a sister, si Inchang na yung nag-fill up ng role ng pagiging nanay kay Itong. Ayan. So, now let's go to the next part of our story. Tell him, Inchang, her father had said. That it was about 3 months ago. Inchang was washing clothes by the well with Tia Orin. Yes, you tell him, Inchang, said Tia Orin. It was always Inchang who dealt with Itong if anything of importance happened. Inchang rose to her feet. She had been squatting long over her washtub and pains shot up her spine. Hoy, Itong, called Inchang. Itong was out in the street playing with Nena, Lakay Ilo's daughter. Hoy, Itong, called Inchang. Come here, I have something to tell you. Itong gave a playful push at Nena before he came running. He smiled as he stepped over the low bamboo barrier at the gate which kept the neighbors' pigs out. How bright his face was! Inchang's heart skipped a bit. You have something to tell me, Manang? Inchang brushed her sudsy hands against her soiled skirt. Yes, it is about your going to vegan. Itong sat down on the barrier. You are going to high school after all, Itong, Inchang said. She said it defiantly, as if afraid that Itong would like going away. She looked up at her father, as if to ask him to confirm her words. Father sat leaning out of the low front window, smoking his pipe. Itong looked at her foolishly. Inchang's heart felt heavy within her, but she said, with a little reproach, Why, Itong? Aren't you glad? We thought that you wanted to go to high school. Itong began to cry. He sat there in front of his father and his sister and his Aunt Orin, and tears crept down on his cheeks. The supervising principal teacher, Mr. Cablana, went on Inchang in a rush, came this afternoon and told us that you may go to high school without paying the fees because you are the valedictorian. Itong nodded. Now, don't cry, said his Aunt Orin. You are no longer a baby. Yes, added the father. And Mr. Cablana also promised to give his laundry to Inchang, so you'll have money for your books. Mr. Cablana is also sure to get the Castillas laundry for Inchang. And that will do for your food, besides the rice that we will be sending you, so stop crying. Your Tata Silin's house is in Nagparsyan, very near the high school. You will stay with him and, Inchang said, I don't have to accompany you to Vigan, Itong. You'll ride in the passenger bus where your cousin Pedro is the conductor. Your cousin Pedro will show you where your Tata Silin lives. Your cousin Muerto, son of your Uncle Silin, will help you register in your school. He is studying in the same school. So now, will you stop crying? Itong looked at Inchang, and the tears continued creeping down his cheeks. Itong was so young. Inchang began to scold him. Is that the way you should act? Why, you're old now. Then Itong ran in the house and remained inside. His father laughed heartily as he pulled at his pipe. Inchang started to laugh also, but her tears began to fall fast also. And she bent her head over her washtub and she began scrubbing industriously, while she laughed and laughed. Outside the gate, standing with her face pressed against the fence, was Nena, watching the tableau with a great wonder in her eyes. Inchang had watched Itong grow up from a newborn baby. She was 6 years old when she carried him around. Straddled over her hip, she kept house, did the family wash, encouraged Itong to go through primary, then intermediate school, when he showed rebellion against school authority. When he was in the 2nd grade and could speak more English words than Inchang, her father began to laugh at her. Also, her Tia Orin and her brood had laughed at her. Schooling would never do me any good, Inchang had said light. She watched Itong go through school, ministering to his needs lovingly, doing more perhaps for him than was good for him. Once she helped him fight a gang of roadies from the other end of the town. Or better, she fought the gang for him using the big rice ladle when she was using in the kitchen at that time. And her father had never married again, being always faithful in the memory of Inchang's mother. The farm which he tilled produced enough rice and vegetables for the family's use, and such few centavos as Lakay Iban would now and then need for the cockpit, he got out of Inshang's occasional sales of vegetables in the public market or a few bundles of rice in the Camarin. Few were the times when they were hard-pressed for money. One was the time when Inshang's mother died, and another was now that Itong was going to vegan. Ayan, so yun yung third part ng kwento natin. Medyo may kahabaan siya, pero madami tayong information na nakuha. So yung scene na yun, flashback siya from 3 months ago nung pinag-uusap-usapan ng kanyang tiya Orin ni Inshang at ng tatay niya na dapat nang sabihin ni Inshang kay Itong na kailangan itong umalis papuntang Vigan. So si Inshang, sinabi niya kay Itong na pwede siyang mag-aral ng high school, but yung consequence is kailangan niyang mamuhay ng malayo sa kanila. So, si Inshang, kailangan niyang maiwan dun sa kanila dahil kailangan niya magtrabaho para masuportahan ang mga pangangailangan ni Itong habang ito'y nag-aaral sa Vigan. So, sinabi din na si Itong dun muna siya titira sa kanilang Tata Silin's house na malapit dun sa high school and doon din naman nag-aaral yung mga pinsan niya. So, yung kanyang big sister, she could not accompany him anymore. So, yung announcement na yun, nung sinabi yun ni Inshang kay Itong, medyo nalungkot si Itong. Hindi nga lang nalungkot, naiyak pa si Itong. Kasi parang he was too young. Masyado pa siyang bata para mamuhay mag-isa or mamuhay ng malayo sa ate niya na tinuring niya ng nanay. Ayan. And, syempre, nabigla din siya kasi hindi niya naman ine-expect na makakapag-aral nga siya ng high school pero malayo naman siya sa kanila. Ayan. So, kailangan ni Itong mag-sacrifice for his big dreams kasi nga mataas yung expectation din ng community niya sa kanya. Kasi nga, 'di ba, sinabi na siya daw yung high school elementary valedictorian nila. Ayan. So, doon din, mas nalaman natin yung history ng family nila Inshang. Ayan. So, si Inshang, 6 years older siya kay Itong. So, 6 years old si Inshang nung naiwan na sa kanya si Itong. So, from then on, ayun nga, ginawa niya na ang lahat para mapalaki ang kapatid niya. So, she did not study anymore kasi nga, mas nag-focus na lang siya sa pag-aaral ni Itong. So, siya yung naging guide ni Itong from primary school hanggang sa intermediate and ngayon naman, kailangan yung suportahan si Itong ngayong pupunta na ito ng secondary or high school. So, yung father nila, pinakilala din doon, siya sila kay Iban and sinabi din na hindi na siya nagpakasal ulit dahil nga he respected the memory of Itong's mother. Habang yung family niya push na push kay Itong sa pagpunta nito sa Vigan, si Inshang parang nadudurog yung puso niya kasi ngayon lang mapapalayo sa kanya yung bata or yung kapatid na pinalaki niya. So, ngayon naman, pagpatuloy natin ang kwento natin. Inshang was working to send him away, when all she wanted was to keep him always at her side. She spent sleepless nights thinking of how Itong would fare in a strange town amid strange people, even though their parientes would always be near him. It would not be the same. She cried again and again. It would not be the same. When she finished tying up the tampipi, she pushed it to one side of the main room of the house and went to the window. Itong was with a bunch of his friends under the acacia tree across the dirt road. They were sitting on the buttress roots of the tree, chin in hand, toes making figures in the dust. And of course, Itong's closest friend, Nena, was there with them. Strange, Inshang thought, how Itong, even though already 12 years old, still play around with a girl. And then that afternoon, the departure, the passenger truck pausing at the gate, the tampipi of Itong being tossed up to the roof of the truck, the bag of rice, the crate of chickens, the young coconut for Tata Silin's children, then Itong himself in the pair of rubber shoes which he had worn at the graduation exercises and which since then had been kept in the family trunk. Itong being handed into the trunk. Lakay Iban, Tia Rin, and Inshang were all there shouting instructions. All the children in the neighborhood were there. Nena was there. It was quite a crowd that come to watch Itong go away for a year. A year seemed forever to Inshang. Itong sat in the dim interior of the bus, timid and teary-eyed. Inshang glanced again and again at him, her heart heavy within her. And then as the bus was about to leave, there was such a pleading look in the eyes of Itong that Inshang had to go close to him, and he put his hands on her. "I'm afraid, Mana." "Why would you be?" said Inshang, loudly trying to drown out her own fears. "This boy. Why? You're going to Vegan, where there are so many things to see." "I haven't been to Vegan." "You're a lucky boy." "I don't want to leave you." "I'll come to see you in Vegan." She had considered the idea and knew that she could not afford the trip. "Manang," said Itong, "I have a bag of lipay seeds and marbles tied to the rafter over the shelf for the plates. See that no one takes it away, will you?" "Yes." "And Manang, next time you make linuban, don't forget to send some Nena." "Okay?" Inshang nodded. "You like Nena very much?" "Yes," coloring a little. Itong had never concealed anything from her. He had been secretive with his father, with his Aunt Orin, but never with her sister. Ayan, so back to present na tayo. It is finally time for Itong to leave their small town. So bago siya tuluyang umalis, yung night before that, yung ate niya na si Inshang, iyak siya ng iyak kasi sobrang ironic nga naman na nagtatrabaho siya para makapag-aral sa malayo si Itong, pero ang gusto niya lang naman talaga ay ang makasama yung kapatid niya sa tabi niya. Ayan. So si Itong, madami siyang takot, 'di ba? Pero hindi niya alam na yung big sister niya na si Inshang ay takot na takot din para sa kapatid niya. Ayan. So naiisip niya na sobrang strange town, tapos hindi niya pa kilala yung mga tao na nandun. So parang sobrang maninibago si Itong and mag-a-adapt talaga siya dun sa lugar. Ayan. So, nung bago siya umalis, parang fiesta kasi ang daming naghatid kay Itong. So, hindi lang yung mga kalaro niya, nandun din yung mga magulang ng mga kalaro niya, yung mga matatanda dun sa lugar nila. And parang sumisigaw na mga bili nila kay Itong kasi nga, parang napamahal na sa kanila si Itong and si Inshang. Ayan. So, nung papaalis na yung bus, nung nakasakay na si Itong doon, parang medyo na-teary-eye pa siya, 'di ba? Parang sobrang natatakot siya na aalis na siya doon sa comfort zone niya. So, etong ate niya na si Inshang, syempre, nilapitan agad yung little brother niya. Inassure niya ito na wag siyang matakot dahil syempre vegan yon, madami siyang makikita doon, bagong lugar, ganyan. And sinabi niya din na pwede naman niyang bisitahin si Itong. Pero sa isip-isip niya, naiisip niya na hindi naman niya kakayanin yung pamasahe. So sinabi niya lang yon para hindi na matakot si Itong. Yun nga, sinabi na nila yung mga last goodbyes nila, si Itong, hinabili niya pa yung mga holen niya sa ate niya. Yan, hinabili niya din na kapag nagluto yung ate niya ng linuban, ay bigyan yung kalaro niya na si Nena. So, di ba? Kalaro lang ba talaga si Nena? So, yung heart ni Inshang sobrang heavy. Ang tingin niya, yung isang taon sobrang tagal. Dahil mapapalayo na sa kanya ang kanyang kapatid. So now, pagpatuloy na natin ang kwento. From Vegan, Itong wrote his sister only once a month so as to save on stamps and writing paper. His letters were full of expression of warm endearment, and Inshang read them over and over again aloud to her father and to Tia Orin and her brood who came to listen. And when her eyes were dim with the reading, Inshang stood on a chair, and he put the letters away in the space between the bamboo rafter and the cogon roof. "My dear sister," Itong would write in Moro-Moro, Ilocano. And you, my father, and Tiarin, I can never hope to repay my great debt to all of you. And then a narration of day-to-day events as they had happened to him. And so a year passed. Inshang discussed Itong with her father every day. She wanted him to become a doctor because doctors earn even 100 pesos a month. And besides, her father was complaining about pain in the small of his back. Lakay Iban, on the other hand, wanted Itong to become a lawyer because lawyers were big shots and made big names and big money for themselves. If they could have the courts acquit murderers, embezzlers, and other criminals despite of all damning evidence of guilt, and people elected them to the National Assembly. Itong's last letter said that the classes were about to close. Doon, nakita natin kung paano namuhay na magkalayo ang magkapatid. So, nagko-communicate sila by letter. So, itong si Itong, sumusulat siya ng letter or ng mga sulat sa kanyang kapatid once a month. Ayan. So, yung laman ng letter na yun is mostly tungkol sa mga pasasalamat niya kasi nga nakakapag-aral siya and ginagawa ng kapatid niya lahat para sa kanya. And syempre, kinikwento niya din doon kung ano yung mga nangyayari sa kanya doon sa Vigan. Ayan. So, noon kasi wala pang cellphone, so hindi pa sila makapagtsikahan agad-agad. So, ang meron lang is sulat and ayun. So, si Inshang, syempre, natutuwa naman siya na sinusulatan siya ng kapatid niya, tapos bukang bibig niya yon sa mga kasama niya doon. So, lagi niyang kinikwento yung kapatid niya kasi sobrang namimiss niya na to. Tapos, isang araw, nabanggit doon na etong si Inshang, saka yung tatay niya nagtatalo. Si Inshang, sinabi niya, gusto niya daw maging doktor si Itong. Kasi yung mga doktor daw, 100,000 daw yung kinikita and gusto niya na si Itong yung gagamot sa tatay nila kapag nagkasakit ito. Si Lakay Iban naman, yung tatay nila, gusto na maging lawyer si Itong kasi sinabi doon na big shot, big money, and big name daw ang mga lawyers. So, dun sa medyo last part, sinabi doon na ang last letter daw ni Itong kay Inshang ay magtatapos na ang klase nila. And then one morning when Inshang was washing the clothes of the supervising principal teacher with a piece of cotton cloth thrown over her head and shoulders to shelter her from the hot sun, a passenger truck came to stop beside the gate and the boy came out. He was wearing white short pants, a shirt, and a pair of leather slippers. It was Itong, but this stranger was taller by the width of a palm and much narrower. Itong had grown so very fast he had no time to fill in. Itong, are you here already? It is vacation, Manang. Are you not glad to see me? They ran into each other's arms. Then their father came in from the rice field later in the afternoon. How is my lawyer? He asked, and then he noticed Itong wore a handkerchief around his throat. I have a cold, father, said Itong huskily. How long have you had it? For several weeks now. Sus Mariosep, Inshang, boil some ginger with a little sugar for your poor brother. This is bad. Are you sure your cold will not become tuberculosis? Itong drank the concoction. It eased his sore throat a little. It seemed he would never get tired of talking, telling Inshang and Lakay Iban about Vigan, about school, about the boys he met there, about his Uncle Celine and his cousin Murto and the other people at the house in Nagparsyan. He went out with his old cronies, but he neglected his marbles. The marbles hung from the rafter over the shelf for the plates, gathering soot and dust and cobwebs. It was a reminder of Itong's earlier boyhood, and he did not go out with Nena anymore. Have you forgotten your friend Nena already? Inshang asked him, and he reddened. Have you been giving her linuban, Manang? He asked. And when she said yes, he looked glad. On those nights when he did not go out to play, he occupied himself with writing letters in the red light of the kerosene lamp. He used the wooden trunk for a table. Inshang, accustomed to go to sleep soon after the chickens had gone to roost under the house, would lie on the bed mat on the floor, looking up at Itong's back, bent studiously over the wooden trunk. So finally, nakauwi na din si Itong. Ayan, bakasyon na nila. And medyo na-surprise yung ate niya pagka-uwi niya kasi 'di ba naglalaba siya tapos biglang may nag-appear na batang lalaki sa harap niya. Ayan. So sinabi doon na parang ang bilis lumaki ni Itong kasi nga he was taller already by a width of the palm and mas payat na din ito. Ayan. So nung umuwi siya, nakita agad ng tatay niya at ng ate niya na meron siyang sore throat. So, they immediately took action and naglaga agad sila ng mga luya, ganyan, para mapagaling yung sore throat ni Itong. So, he never get tired of talking. Kwento lang siya ng kwento kahit meron na siyang sore throat. Kwento siya ng kwento ng mga new experiences niya and ng mga taong nakilala niya doon sa vegan. So, isa pang napansin ng ate niya is nakikipaglaro siya dun sa mga dati niyang tawag dito, dun sa mga dati niyang kaibigan. Pero bakit hindi daw kasama si Nena? So, tinanong niya kung magkaibigan pa daw ba sila ni Nena, pero parang hindi naman niya to sinagot. So, isa pang napansin ng ate niya is hindi na din niya pinansin yung mga holen niya na pinatago niya sa ate niya. So, ayun, naaalikabukan na lang dun sa aparador nila. So, ibig sabihin na paglipasan niya na ang mga laruan na yon. Parte na yon ng boyhood ni Itong. Ayan. So, during the night, sinasabi din na busy magsulat ng letter etong si Itong na natulog na yung ate niya, tapos itong si Itong is nagsusulat pa din ng letter. So, para kanino kaya ang mga sinusulat niyang letter? Tignan natin sa next part ng ating kwento. Once, she asked, "What are you writing about, Itong?" And Itong had replied, "Nothing, Manang." One day, she found a letter in one of the pockets of his shirts in the laundry pile. She did not mean to read it, but she saw enough to know that the letter came from Nena. She could guess what Itong then had been writing. He had been writing to Nena. Itong had changed. He had begun keeping secrets from Inshang. Inshang noted the development with a slight tightening of her throat. Yes, Itong had grown up. His old clothes appeared 2 sizes too small for him now. Inshang had to sew him new clothes, and when Itong saw the peso bills and the silver coins that Inshang kept under her clothes in the trunk toward the purchase of a silk kerchief which she had long desired, especially since the constabulary corporal had been casting eyes at her when she went to the market, he snuggled up to Inshang and begged her to buy him a drill. A drill terno? Are you sure? A drill terno is what you want? Itong patted his throat as if to clear it. Please, Manang. Oh, you little beggar, you're always asking for things. She tried to be severe. She was actually sorry to part with the money. She had been in love with that silk kerchief for years now. Promise me to take care of your throat. Your cold is a bad one. Ayan. So, ngayon, na-reveal na kung ano ba yung ginagawa ni Itong tuwing gabi. Nagsusulat pala siya ng love letter kay Nena. Ayan. Nalaman ito ni Inshang nung one day nakita niya sa may damit ni Itong ang letter na galing kay Nena. So, hindi na lang pala sila magkaibigan. Nag-upgrade na pala ang relationship nila. So, ayan. Nung nakita ni Inshang yun, may na-realize siya na unti-unti na talagang nagbabago yung kapatid niya na si Itong. Kasi 'di ba dati wala itong tinatago sa kanya. Pero ngayon, nagsisimula na siyang maglihim ng mga konting bagay sa kanyang kapatid. Ayan. So, he really grew up. Kahit nga yung mga damit niya is sikip na sa kanya. Isang araw nga, nag-request pa siya dun sa ate niya na ibili siya ng drill suit terno. So, parang yung mga sinusuot yon ng JS Prom, ayun yung gusto niya. So, si Inshang, sinesave niya sana yung yung pera na yon para ipambili ng something for herself. Yung gusto niya daw is yung parang handkerchief na nakita niya na gusto niyang gusto niyang ipampa-cute dun sa nanliligaw sa kanya na isang constabulary officer. Kaso nga lang, dahil ni-request ng kapatid niya, wala naman siyang magawa. Kasi 'di ba si Itong palaging siya yung priority ng ate niya bago yung sarili niya. Another summertime when Itong came home from school. He was a young man. He had put on his white drill suit terno and the pink shirt and the pink tie to match. And Inshang could hardly believe her eyes. She was even quite abashed to go meet him at the gate. "Why? Is it you, Itong?" He was taller than she. He kept looking down at her. "Manang, who else could I be? You looked at me so strangely." His voice was deep and husky, and it had queer inflections. "But, how do I look?" Inshang embraced him, tears again in her eyes, as tears had been in her eyes a year ago when Itong had came back after the first year of parting, but Itong pulled away hastily, and he looked back self-consciously at the people in the truck which was then starting away. "You have your cold still, so I hear," said Lakay Iban, as he came out of the house to join his children. "Yes," said Itong, his words accented in the wrong places. "I have my cold still." Looking at Itong, Inshang understood, and Itong too understood. Lakay Ibang and Inshang looked at each other, and when Inshang saw the broad grin spreading over her father's face, she knew he understood too. "He should know." "Inshang," said father gravely. Inshang rested her eyes from Nena, whom she saw was looking at Itong shyly from behind the fence of her father's front yard. "Inshang, boil some ginger and vinegar for your poor brother. He has that bad cold still." So, isang taon na naman ang lumipas at bakasyon na naman ni Itong. So, pagka-uwi niya, sinalubong siya ng ate niya and laking gulat nito kasi yung baby brother niya mas matangkad na sa kanya. So, dinescribe nga niya si Itong na young man. Ayan, young man na ito. So, nung niyakap niya yung kapatid niya, napansin niya na parang ang bilis lang ng yakap nila, tapos umalis na agad sa yakap si Itong. Yun pala, isa sa mga pagbabago ni Itong is mas naging self-conscious na din siya. Tinignan niya yung mga nakasakay sa bus na nakatingin sa kanila and parang nahiya siya. Ayan. So, nung pagdating nila dun sa kanila, napansin agad ng tatay niya na inuubo na naman itong si Itong. And syempre, pinag-utos niya agad dun sa kanyang mas nakakatandang anak na ipagawa ito nung luya ulit para maibsan yung sore throat ni Itong. Pero hindi napansin ni Itong na nag-uusap-usap yung ate niya saka yung tatay niya. Kasi yung tingin niya is focus dun sa babae na nasa labas ng bakuran nila na si Nena. Ayan. So, nagkatinginan yung tatay niya saka si Nena and parang nag-usap sila sa isip nila na, kaya naman pala busy-busy si Itong. Kasi parang, ayun na, nakita na nila na magkatitigan na si Nena saka si Itong. So, parang ayun na, nakita na nila na magkatitigan na si Nena sa si Itong. Ayan. So, pumapag-ibig na ang ating character na si Itong. And tignan natin kung ano ba ang susunod na mangyayari. Inshang wept deep inside of her as she cooked the rice in the kitchen a little later. She had seen Itong stay at the door and make signs to Nena. She resented his attention to Nena. She resented his height, his pink shirt, his necktie. But that night, as she lay awake on the floor, waiting for Itong to come home, she knew that despite all the ache of her heart, she could not keep Itong forever young, forever the boy whom she had brought up. That time would keep him growing for several years, yet more and more distant to her. And then all the bitterness in her heart flowed out in tears. In the morning, when Nena came to borrow one of the pesos, "We are 3 2-pound rice, Manang Inshang. May we borrow one of your pesos?" Inshang could smile easily at Nena. She could feel a comradely spirit towards Nena growing within her. After all, she thought, as she gave Nena the peso, she never had a sister. She would like to see how it was to have a sister, a good-looking one like Nena. Inshang smiled at Nena, and Nena, blushing, smiled back at her. So, that was the last part of our story. So, doon nakita natin na parang si Inshang sumasakit yung puso niya. Kasi yung little brother niya, hindi niya matanggap na he is already not so little anymore. So, ang daming nagbago. Bawat taon na lumilipas, bawat uwi ni Itong, may nagbabago at nagbabago sa kanya. So, yung baby boy na pinalaki niya noon, ay hindi na talaga baby boy. And as he grew up, medyo lumalayo na. Hindi naman sa sobrang layo, pero medyo lumalayo na yung loob niya dun sa ate niya. Hindi na katulad ng dati na bawat kibot niya, pupunta siya dun sa ate niya, di ba? So, she could not keep Itong forever young, sabi nga dun sa kwento. Kasi, hindi naman pwedeng hindi nalalaki yung kapatid niya. Magkakaroon na to ng sariling mundo, magkakaroon na to ng mga sariling gustong gawin sa buhay. So, si Itong, nandun na siya sa point kung saan ine-enjoy niya na yung teenage years niya. Ine-enjoy niya na yung buhay kung saan nag-e-explore siya ng mga bagong experiences on his own. Hindi niya na kailangan ng guidance mula sa ate niya. Siyempre, bata pa siya, may mga bagay pa rin na kailangan yung ate niya, pero mostly, gusto niya na ini-enjoy yung mga bagay sa sarili niya, including falling in love. Ayan. So, that girl happened to be Nena. So, sinabi nga doon na itong si Insyang, ayaw niya nung attention na binibigay ni Itong. Parang, she resented everything she resented who Itong is now. Parang, ayaw niya na binibigyan niya mas binibigyan niya ng attention yung mga kaibigan niya, si Nena, ganyan. Ayaw niya yung height ni Itong na mas matangkad na sa kanya. Ayaw niya din yung yung pananamit ni Itong. So, parang everything seems so strange. And ayun nga, nung end naman ng story, parang nagkaroon naman ng realization etong si Insyang. Nung nanghihiram ng pesel si Nena sa kanya, she realized na si Nena, part ito ng pagbibinata ni Itong. Ayan. And besides, maganda si Nena and wala siyang naging kapatid na babae. So, di ba? Parang biglang gumaan yung loob niya, knowing na instead na i-hate niya yung mga bagay na nangyayari kay Itong ngayon, why not mahalin niya din ito, and kasama na doon si Nena. Ayan. Ayan, so, doon na nagtatapos yung kwento natin. Again, siya ay Big Sister by Consorcio Borge. Ayan, so, isa siyang Filipino story, kasi tignan niyo man yung setting niya sa Philippines, sa Vigan, sa Ilocos. And, maganda siyang story kasi naisip ko na makaka-relate kayo sa kanya. Kasi nga, 'di ba? You're at that point in your life kung saan high school na din kayo and nagsa-start na kayo na gawin yung mga bagay na sa sarili nyo lang. And kanina, bago tayo magsimula, tinanong ko din kayo na ano ba yung mga bagay na ginagawa nyo noon na hindi nyo na sila nagagawa ngayon. 'Di ba? Meron at merong papasok sa isip natin kasi hindi na naman tayo yung mga batang paslit noon na konting kibot, konting gusto natin, sinasabi natin sa magulang natin. So, you are at that point kung saan para kayong si Itong, you are coming of age. So, as you grow, yung mga changes, hindi naman yan maiiwasan. And kayo mismo, manonotice nyo yan sa sarili nyo. So, di ba? Dati parang gusto nyo, nood-nood lang kayo ng cartoons sa umaga. Ngayon, hindi na cartoons yung gusto nyong panoorin. Parang gusto nyo na din mga Netflix, ganyan, mga series, mga anime. So, parang may mga bagay na nagbago na talaga sa inyo. So, from being your mama's baby girl or baby boy, ngayon, may mga tinatawag na kayong baby. Ayan, meron sa inyo, may mga kanya-kanya ng tinatawag na baby. Pero wag muna kayo magbe-baby. Ayan. So, gustong iparating ng kwento na to na growing up is okay. So, sobrang essential niya para matuto kayo tumayo sa sarili nyo. Kasi yung real battle, papalapit na ng palapit, which is yung adulthood. And itong teenage years nyo, pwede nyo siyang gamitin para mag-ipon ng experiences, matuto sa mga experiences na yon. So, you would know what's right and what's wrong when you experience it. So, hindi nyo na kailangan na laging i-baby pa ng mga magulang nyo kasi kailangan may mga bagay na kayo na yung mag-decide kung tama ba o yung mali. But ito yung lesson dito. Don't drift away too much from your family. Ayan. At the end of the day, yung family nyo pa din, yung mga tao na nandyan para sa inyo kahit ano yung mangyari. Kagaya ni Inshang at nung tatay niya, 'di ba? Bawat uwi ni Itong, kahit hindi na sila yung priority ni Itong, pag tuwing uuwi si Itong, sobrang tuwang-tuwa pa din sila and napapansin agad nila yung mga sakit ni Itong, kagaya nga ng sore throat, and gumagawa agad sila ng remedy doon. So, hindi din natin kasi masisisi si Inshang. Ayan, hindi natin siya masisisi na medyo gano'n na nalulungkot siya. Kasi nga, all her life at sa napakabatang edad, mas inisip niya na si Itong kesa sa kapakanan niya. Pwede naman siyang mag-enjoy, maging bata, na mag-aral. Pero di ba, hindi. Kasi naging selfless siya and dinedicate niya na yung buhay niya kay Itong. So, kagaya ng mga magulang nyo, ng mga kapatid nyo, alam ko na sobrang eager kayong maka-experience ng mga bagay-bagay. But huwag niyong kakalimutan na tanungin pa din sila from time to time. I-appreciate nyo pa din yung family nyo. Lalong-lalo na ngayong pandemic. Ayan. Hindi natin masabi kung ano yung mga bagay na pwedeng mangyari. Kaya naman, habang nandyan pa sila, i-appreciate nyo sila. Hindi naman masama na na pumunta sa mga kaibigan nyo, na kausapin yung mga kaibigan nyo, but make sure na you also make time for your family. So, that is all for today. Ayan, sana may natutunan kayo sa maikling kwento na aking binasa at shinare sa inyo. Again, maraming salamat, Naik Integrated National High School, and sa lahat ng bumubuo ng online reading hub sa ilalim ng proyektong LEARN or Learn. Ayan. And special mention kay Teacher Kate Malimban na nag-invite sa akin dito. Thank you so much, Teacher Kate. And ayun. Sana kung nasan man kayo, you are all safe and you are all healthy. Palagi kayong mag-ingat and yun lang. Salamat!